Long before there were any houses, stores, factories, or roads, American Indians lived on the open lands of California. The climate there was warmer than in most other parts of the country, and there was plenty of food to hunt and gather. Many different languages were spoken, and Indians living near the beach built different kinds of houses and wore different kinds of clothes than Indians who lived in the deserts or mountains. The Indians in Long Beach spoke Shoshone. They built round, dome-like houses from willow branches and tule reeds they gathered in the marshes near the beach. They lived in small villages and moved their homes whenever they needed to find new sources of food. The Indians got all their food from the land. Women collected acorns, which they ground to make acorn meal. The meal had a bitter taste, which made people sick, so they had to wash it many times before they could cook it into hot cereal or pancakes. Men used bows and arrows to hunt rabbits, squirrels, and deer, and went fishing in the ocean and dug for clams. Even children helped to get food. They gathered seeds and berries. Because Long Beach is usually warm, the Indians did not need much clothing. Women wore skirts made from fibers or animal skins, and men folded furs around their hips. Men and women both liked to paint and tattoo their faces and bodies. They thought this would make them look prettier, and also thought it would keep away evil spirits. After Europeans began to settle California, the Indians from Long Beach were named Gabrielino. They were named after the mission San Gabriel, which was built by the Spanish in 1771 to help teach the local Indians about Christianity and to become a supply station for people traveling from Mexico to Monterrey. Most Indians from Long Beach went to live at the mission, where they were taught blacksmithing, farming, weaving, and other skills. The first mission in California was built in 1769 in San Diego. Father Serra traveled with Captain Portillo, Spanish soldiers and Mexican Indians to help settle California and claim it as a Spanish territory. While Father Serra built many other missions, the other settlers established presidios, or forts, to help defend the land for Spain, and pueblos, or towns. Some settlers owned ranchos. One Spanish soldier, Manuel Nieto, was given a large rancho near the mission San Gabriel so that he could raise cattle and crops. He built a small adobe home on the land and lived there with his family. After he died, his children divided up the land, and both Rancho Los Cerritos and Rancho Los Alamitos were created. These new ranchos were still very big. Rancho Los Cerritos stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Downey and included today's cities of Long Beach, Signal Hill, Lakewood, Paramount, and Bellflower. In 1822, the Mexicans fought for their independence from Spain and became a separate country. California became part of Mexico. Before, California could trade only with Spain. Now trade was allowed with America, Russia, England, and other nations. These other nations wanted cattle hides to make leather for shoes, saddles, and furniture. They also bought tallow, the fat of the cattle, to make soap and candles. Because the Californians could make lots of money selling hides and tallow, they started demanding more land so they could raise more cattle. They also needed more help on the ranch. Soon, the Mexican government took mission lands away from the church and sold them to the ranchers. The Indians could not stay at the missions, and many went to work on the ranchos. One man who made lots of money in the hide and tallow trade was Joseph Temple. He was an American who settled in Mexican California, married a Mexican señorita, and opened a business in Los Angeles. In 1843, Mr. Temple bought Rancho Los Cerritos and built the present adobe home. He planted a large garden, stocked the lands with thousands of cattle, and hired a foreman to watch the ranch. The foreman supervised the workers, kept accurate records, and organized roundups. Each spring, Mr. Temple held a rodeo. The cattle were rounded up from the hills and counted. New calves were roped and branded with the mark of the Rancho. Older cattle were killed, and their hides were dried and prepared for shipping. The tallow was removed from the cattle, heated in large pots, and poured into hide bags or molds, so it too could be brought to San Pedro and be traded. When the work was done, Mr. Temple and his vaqueros celebrated with a big party or fiesta. These fiestas lasted 2 or 3 days. There was much feasting, music, and dancing, and men tried their skills at bear roping and bullfighting. In the 1840s, war broke out between the United States and Mexico because of a fight over boundaries in Texas. Fighting spread to California, and when America won the war in 1848, California became part of the United States. That same year, James Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill near Sacramento. The gold rush began, and people came from all over the world to look for riches. Few miners became wealthy. Prices for food and housing were high. The work was not easy, and gold was hard to find. Some men made more money by becoming merchants and supplying miners with things they needed to live. 3 of these men were Llewellyn Bixby and his cousins Benjamin and Thomas Flint. Mr. Bixby and his cousins didn't enjoy mining very much. They soon bought a butcher shop and sold fresh meat to the gold miners. Their shop did well, and Mr. Bixby and the Flints decided to become ranchers and raise their own animals. They sailed to their home in the east to buy sheep, which they would bring back to California. It took 10 months to drive the sheep across the United States. The men settled near the Mission San Juan Bautista and bought a ranch. Twice a year they sheared the wool off the sheep and sold it to merchants in San Francisco. They also sold some sheep for food. In 1861, the Civil War broke out. Clothing factories in the Northeast could not buy cotton from the South since they had become enemies. They started buying more wool from sheep ranches in California, and men like Mr. Bixby and the Flints were able to expand their businesses. Mr. Bixby and his cousins needed more land for their sheep. Ranchers in Southern California were selling their land very cheaply because several years of bad weather, in which there was either too much rain or not enough, had killed most of their cattle. Mr. Bixby and the Flints bought John Temple's land, Rancho Los Cerritos, and brought sheep down from Northern California. Mr. Bixby's brother, Jotham, moved to the rancho to manage the sheep business. Jotham Bixby and his family lived and worked at Rancho Los Cerritos for the next 15 years. Later, as California's population grew, Mr. Bixby gave up ranching and moved to Los Angeles. He sold some of Rancho Los Cerritos to farmers and town developers. The city of Long Beach was built on part of the Rancho property. About 60 years ago, the adobe ranch house was fixed up, and fireplaces, electricity, and indoor bathrooms were added. Today, when you enter through the main gates, make believe these changes never happened. Use your imagination. You were back in the year 1878, when sheep grazed on the fields, and many people lived and worked on the ranch. You are in the past. Welcome to Adobe Days.
The Rancho stands today just as it did then. The same stately trees, the same adobe building. Each tree planted with care, each mud brick laid one at a time, begun with the desire to create a life in this new territory of California. It has been said that if you stand here at dawn and watch and listen carefully, that you can still catch glimpses of what life was like back in the days before automobiles, electricity, and grocery stores. My name is Sarah Bixby Smith. I was born on a sheep ranch in Northern California in 1871. When my parents, Llewellyn and Mary Bixby, moved to Los Angeles in 1878, Rancho Los Cerritos became a place of adventure where I spent my vacations and summers. But the story of the Rancho begins in the 1700s. At that time, Los Cerritos was part of a large land grant given to Don Manuel Nieto by the Spanish government. When Señor Nieto died, the land was divided amongst his heirs. In 1844, the 27,000-acre Rancho Los Cerritos portion was sold to John Temple, one of the more visionary early settlers of Los Angeles. He built the original adobe house, drying mud bricks in the sun for thick walls and shipping redwood from Northern California for the beams. Temple raised cattle at the rancho until 1866, when he sold the place to my father and his cousins. Uncle Jotham was chosen to live there and manage the sheep business. The ranch house was placed on the brow of a mesa. The eyes could follow across the flat lands, treeless except for a few low-growing willows, to far blue, mysterious mountains. It was a very empty land, empty of people and towns. But, of course, it did not remain so. And even then, at certain times of the year, the place bustled with activity and excitement. There were many workers on the rancho, some as full-time employees, others as seasonal or part-time workers. I remember one strong and stalwart character, the most perfect horseman and acknowledged leader of the vaqueros, Juan Cañedo. He himself set up the claim that Mr. Temple sold him with the ranch to Mr. Bixby, with whom he intended to stay. He looked like a bronze statue. Brown face, brown clothes, brown horse, and infinite tranquility.
I was a young man when I came to the rancho, a vaquero. Oh, those were the days of excitement and fiestas. Señor Templo had many cattle, more than 15,000. My favorite times were the cattle roundups, because in those days, in the 1840s, there were no fences to keep the cattle close. They roamed libres, free, wherever they wanted. Every year we had to find them and bring them back. The older ones were slaughtered for their hides and their tallow, the fat. And the younger ones were branded so they could be found later. When gold was discovered in 1849, we drove the cattle northward to sell to the hard-working, hungry miners. For a while, we received our share of the treasure. I was young and strong and very good with the reata, the rope, if I do say so myself. Roundup days were long and hard, but afterwards, the fiesta. We would race the caballos and eat, and all night long we would dance the fandango. And then there were the contests. How we loved the range. Then in 1862 there was a drought. No rain. For more than 2 years, the cattle business finally came to an end. Señor Templo was getting older, so he sold the rancho to the Bixbys. Did you know that I was sold with the rancho to the Bixbys? Well, I was. But really, I loved the rancho so much that I stayed and spent the rest of my life in the service of Mr. Bixby. The Bixbys brought sheep, woolly-backs, and merinos, thousands of them. And the casa came to life with the laughter of los niños. Those were easier days.
The adobe ranch house we purchased from Mr. Temple was fairly primitive. After all, much of the building was used for cattle operations and as sleeping quarters for the vaqueros. When Aunt Margaret moved in, some changes had to be made.
You can imagine how I felt, a proper New England lady heading south on a dusty road to the Cerritos Ranch. It was so far away from everything I knew. Not a train or streetcar for 500 miles. Imagine my surprise my first morning there when I realized there was no stove. An Indian boy was doing his morning chore, starting a fire by rubbing 2 sticks together. Right away, I ordered a modern iron range for the kitchen. Even then, we used the big outside brick oven, the Orno, for most of our baking. Oh, and the interiors. The house needed updating. A little wallpaper, some new furniture, fresh whitewash. When we finally replaced the leaky earth and tar roof with a proper shingled one, I knew it could be a home. So I set about at once to organize. After all, children needed routine. There were the children's studies to attend to and sewing to be done, for we made most of our own clothes. We had so much expert help. The Mexicans were employed as ranch hands. The Basques from Spain or France worked as sheep herders. The Indians helped with the general labor. And the Chinese were excellent cooks and did the weekly laundry. There was always such a bustle of activity, visiting friends and family. Oh, and the holidays, when we dressed the place up and made it shine. There was quiet, too. We spent many peaceful evenings on the veranda, admiring the beautiful trees planted by Mr. Temple, listening to the waves crashing on the beach 5 miles away. It was a special place.
The Chinese were a major labor force in Los Angeles in the 1870s. Many had come to work the railroads or seek their fortunes in gold. Most ended up working in domestic lines like cooking, laundries, and supplies. Ah Ying was not the first Chinese man I ever met, but he certainly made the greatest impression.
I came to the ranch from San Francisco, where I learned to cook American food. The Bixbys liked simple food, and as chief cook, I prepared up to 6 meals a day. But not just for the Bixbys. There were workers from many countries at the ranch, and I tried to make all of them happy. Hot chilies for the Mexicans. Sometimes Chinese food, sweet sugar cookies for the children. Fan, my helper, and I were busy every day. Together, we served the big meals to the workers in the main dining room. The family ate in their own dining room in the house. We even made lunches for the men who worked in the fields. The Bixbys went to Los Angeles to buy supplies 2 or 3 times each month. Mostly staples like flour, sugar, coffee, and beans. We grew many things at the Rancho: apples and oranges, grapes and pears. And of course, we always had lamb, chicken, and beef that we raised, and occasionally some fresh game. We had milk cows and made cheese and butter from the fresh milk. The things we did not get in Los Angeles or from the Rancho, I could buy from our phone. He came every Thursday in his wagon full of fresh fruits and vegetables. He also brought me news from Los Angeles and from my home in China.
Sheep were the main interest of the ranches. As children, we got to help at shearing time, braiding twine to tie the fleece, stenciling the company name on the long burlap bags of wool, and even handing out the copper checks to the shearers for each fleece they delivered. Uncle Jotham employed many ranch workers over the years, but one of the family's favorites was the merry Irishman, Johnny O'Connor, who always had time for a joke with us children.
I love me days at the Rancho. There was always so much to be done. I was in charge of the blacksmith shop, fixing and repairing. For in addition to the sheep, Mr. Bixby had several thousand cattle. And there was always horses to shoe, no hinges to make, and the children to impress. Ranching is a hard way to make a living, and spending a little time with Sarah, Harry, and the others always made me day go a wee bit better. I kept busiest at shearing time, and with 30,000 sheep to shear, you can bet we had a time of it. 50 to 60 Mexican cowboys would come in for the shearing twice a year, wearing their fine boots and ruffled shirts. But when it came time to work, they were all business. The poor sheep were clipped, deprived of their fluffy coats, and run through the sheep dip almost before you could say Buenos Dias. And soon they were standing, sheared and shorn, and looking a bit dazed. We clipped 200,000 pounds of wool each year to ship it to Boston. And some of it came back to us as suits and blankets and, I do believe, underwear. But for all the excitement at shearing time, the rest of the year was rather quiet for a sheep herder. A man would spend all his time alone in the sheep camp with his dogs and sheep. Supplies were delivered once a week, and I suppose it took a special breed of man willing to spend all his time alone like that. But whether he was looking for something or running away for something made no difference. If he was good at what he did, he was paid for his work. It was a lonely life, not suitable for a man such as myself. I loved people, to hear them sing when I played the fiddle, to make them laugh over a good joke. So, after a while, I left the Rancho to open myself a saloon in Los Angeles. I know, the Bixbys didn't approve of liquor or of me selling it, but they never had an unkind word for me. And I returned many a time to the Rancho and was welcomed as family.
Memories of Uncle Jotham, my father's brother, are of quiet evenings, playing cribbage, reading books, and sitting by the parlor stove. He was a hard worker. The activity, the comforts, and the economy of the ranch were all upon his shoulders.
When I think about it now, probably the best thing to happen to me was following my brother and cousins to California. While we didn't find our fortune in gold, we certainly did find wealth in the land. Business was my life. I was always looking for a way to make money. I think my favorite endeavor was the sheep ranch at the Cerritos. Breeding strong stock, improving the quality of wool, and, well, making a deal. I can never forget those ranching days. But times change, and this land was too good to be kept a secret for long. Soon many people moved west, by wagon and then by railroad. They needed a place to farm, a place to live, and to raise a family. Well, eventually, the family decided to divide the rancho so that others could enjoy its fortunes. And, of course, we turned a profit. We sold some of it, leased parcels for townships, and we even worked some of it ourselves as farms and dairies. In 1885, Mrs. Bixby and I moved to the new town of Long Beach, a town I helped found on part of Los Cerritos. We started the first Congregational Church, and we gave land to all worthy causes. We became known as the mother and father of Long Beach. Isn't that something? Yep, the rancho was good to us. We prospered from its bounty, and now I hope you profit by it too.
Little by little, more of the ranch was sold to satisfy the growing population. Soon the ranch house was surrounded by settlements. Lakewood, Bellflower, and Paramount was some of the new cities. Soon, the house fell into disrepair. But not for long. In typical Bixby fashion, my brother, Llewellyn, remodeled the house in 1930 for his personal residence. Walls were repaired, the roof was replaced, modern conveniences were added, and the gardens were replanted by landscape architect Ralph Cornell. Once again, the halls echoed with the laughter of children. No longer a fold for sheep, the Rancho was now home to a new generation, providing them with security, warmth, and fond memories. Finally, in 1955, the Rancho home was acquired by the city of Long Beach and has become a museum and historic landmark. So, the wide ancient land, once home to Indians and wildlife, became home to cattle, then to sheep. Soon the sheep were all gone. The pastoral life gave way to the agricultural, and that, in turn, to the town and city. The Rancho stands today just as it did then. The same stately trees, the same adobe building, each tree planted with care, each mud brick laid one at a time, begun with the desire to create a life in this new territory of California. A life that continues on in each of us.
The 4-acre Rancho Los Cerritos historic site is located in the Bixby Knolls area of Long Beach. It's listed as a National Historic Landmark and as a State Historic Landmark. The site is maintained as a tangible piece of history by the City of Long Beach through the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Marine. The Rancho now sponsors tours, school programs, and events throughout the year. And the Historic Gardens and California History Library are available for public use and enjoyment. For more information about special events or to arrange a group tour, please contact the Rancho. Rancho Los Cerritos, the roots of Long Beach.